Hello and welcome. Tonight, we step quietly into one of the most turbulent, disorienting, and transformative moments in European history, the French Revolution. But we won't begin with storming palaces or echoing slogans. No, we'll begin in the shadows of quiet alleyways, with the worn hands of bakers, with the whispered fears of merchants. This is the slow, daily rhythm of lives pressed under the weight of political uncertainty and social upheaval, suspicion and hope. With hunger, from the anxious life of a Parisian citizen to the rise and unraveling of Robespierre, we will move gently through the experiences of ordinary and extraordinary people. From the soft candlelight of political salons to the silk-draped halls of Versailles, this isn't the history of declarations or great men shouting in chambers, though those stories, too, will find their way to us in time. Over the next 2 hours, you are invited to relax, soft and steady, as sleep begins to drift near, to settle in, and to let the distant world of the 18th century quietly unfold around you. Let the past murmur its stories. Let us begin. Imagine yourself, not as a noble or a revolutionary leader, but as a baker's wife, or a bookseller's apprentice, or a laundress who wakes before the sun and carries water up 5 flights of stairs for strangers. It is the summer of 1789. The air in Paris is warm, military patrols. You're not sure if they're protecting the people or watching them, but heavy with more than just humidity. It is heavy with something unspoken, an unease that coils under conversations, or rather, even the noblemen whose carriage creaked past on cobbled streets. But not anymore. There is bread, but it is gone before the sun rises. You remember the notice from the baker yesterday. Someone fainted. A child cried and asked for apples, but the apples are gone too. Prices change every morning now, and sometimes they don't just rise, they leap. Behind closed doors and within the daily rhythm of life, you wake to the sound of distant hooves. Again, there is no bread. You hesitate. You look behind before speaking freely. Really? You wonder quietly, a shout. The ring of a bell, or worse, the rhythm of a marching mob. Whether your neighbor might report your words. Flour supplies are late again. You'd stood in line for 2 hours. You must live. You must walk these streets. You must fetch water, buy candles, care for children, stitch worn clothing again and again until your fingers ache. The people you once greeted every morning with nods and neighborly smiles now avoid your gaze. Everyone is a stranger when food is short. You may have once trusted the town guards, the tax collectors, now not to the king's men, but to the crowd. Conversations twist like vines, tangled. The firewood costs more than ever. You wear the same coat each day. The lining is thin. And you feel every cobblestone under your shoes when you walk. Whispered, half-suspected truths. Or they had the wrong kind of friend. There is no single enemy. There is fear in every direction. In the markets, the kind of stillness that listens. The streets are still. That waits. That perhaps your child one day will not know what it is to beg for bread. They say the queen keeps diamonds in her shoe buckles. They say the bakers hoard the flour. They say they move faster than carriages. They shape opinion. They shape fear. But who are they? Rumors are more filling than food these days. At night, a scream might break it. If you're fortunate, still light a fire and share a stew with your family. But even that is uncertain. And yet, you might. You ration the salt. Then comes the sound that everyone now knows intimately. The sharp silhouette of the guillotine. The sound of wood being hammered together. But it is there. A scaffold. A platform. And above it, it is not always used. And in its silent presence is a message. You are being watched. Everyone is being watched. To speak too boldly is dangerous. To remain silent is suspicious. You are told this is liberty. You wonder. The wind whistles through cracks in walls not built for revolution. The ones with loud voices, their shop closed. Under the fear, there is hope. Their cat, still on the steps, waiting. The whole city is tired. The ones with influence, there are patrols. There are knocks on doors at strange hours. The ones who know when to say nothing, from the quiet footsteps of the street-level world, we rise slowly to follow a single man whose name would come to define this era. You are told the revolution is for the people. You mend a shirt. You light a candle. But which people? In the winter. You are tired. But sleep is not easy. There are arrests. You knew someone, perhaps you only met them once, who was taken. They spoke at a salon. Or they printed a pamphlet. Uncertain and unglamorous. There is still something unbroken. Now their windows are shuttered. You've learned not to ask questions. And yet, somewhere, a fragile hope that perhaps this chaos is leading to something better, that perhaps a world is being remade, even if it is slow and painful and hard to watch. You fold the washing, and you keep going, because in the rhythm of this life, fearful, the rhythm of survival, the rhythm of waiting, the quiet heartbeat of an ordinary citizen in an extraordinary time. And now, you've heard his name whispered, shouted, carved into plaques, and torn from them just as quickly. Maximilien Robespierre, a man of paper, of speeches, of law, a man who claimed to love the people, and who sent thousands of them to the guillotine. But like most figures who loom large in history, he began quietly, with books, with ideals, with a mind shaped not by power, but by philosophy. Let's return to the very beginning. The quiet boy from Arras. He was born in 1758 in the small northern town of Arras, far from the thrum of Paris. His mother died young. His father abandoned the family shortly after. Little Maximilien was raised by relatives. He was quiet, serious, always reading. He believed deeply in virtue, justice, and the rule of law. Not tall, not loud, not particularly charismatic, but he was principled. He believed that France could be transformed, peacefully, rationally, virtuously. He won a scholarship to study law in Paris, a rare privilege for someone from his background. He read Rousseau, Montesquieu, Plutarch. By the time the revolution began, Robespierre was in his early 30s. He spoke against the death penalty. He advocated for the rights of the poor. He stood in front of the king and demanded equality. The people loved him for it. At first. The incorruptible. As the revolution gathered steam, Robespierre became known as l'incorruptible, the incorruptible one. He didn't drink. He didn't marry. He didn't chase wealth. He lived simply with his sister in a rented room. He wore modest clothes. He walked, rather than rode, to meetings. But his ideals were sharp as razors. He believed that democracy must be protected from itself, a temporary medicine to save the republic. That virtue, in times of crisis, required force. And as France descended into chaos, foreign wars, economic collapse, political assassinations, Robespierre began to believe that fear was a necessary tool. He joined the Committee of Public Safety. He passed emergency laws. He gave speeches that could chill a room to silence. He declared, "Severe, inflexible justice. It is therefore an emanation of virtue." Terror is nothing but prompt. Women who spoke too loudly in salons. In other words, to create peace, there must first be blood. The reign of terror. It fell again. They were called, and again. Clergy, bakers, street performers. The guillotine stood tall in the center of Paris. Each day, one-sided, many anonymous. Robespierre oversaw trials, swift, enemies of the revolution, by Robespierre's standards. Nobles, and former friends, Georges Danton, Camille Desmoulins. Once allies, now traitors. He watched as they were taken away. He signed their deaths. He spoke of their corruption. He believed it was all necessary, until he too became a threat, necessary for the greater good, necessary for the Republic to survive, necessary. The fall. By the summer of 1794, even Robespierre's allies were afraid. He stopped attending meetings. He refused to name his next targets, only saying he had a list of traitors. The silence was terrifying. 1794, Robespierre died, wounded and silent, to the same guillotine where he had sent so many others. We are reminded, what if you were on the list? He tried to kill himself with a pistol, but failed, shattering his jaw. What if your friend was? The convention turned on him. They shouted him down in the assembly. His voice, once ironclad, now shook. He was arrested. He was dragged. On July 28th, the reign of terror ended. After the silence, when pushed too far, can harden into something brittle and lethal. Today, Robespierre is remembered as both a visionary and a tyrant. Some see him as a necessary force in revolutionary times. Others, as the architect of one of the darkest chapters in French history. But he was also human, a man who loved books, who wanted justice, who believed that good must sometimes come at great cost. In his fall, even in the name of virtue, can become dangerous. That power, that ideals, he tried to build a better world, but he lost himself in the process. And so we leave the guillotine behind, and turn now to something older, stranger, and quieter still. Step away now from the streets and scaffolds, and into the warm, lamplit rooms of revolutionary Paris. Here, the tea is steeping, the wine is poured, and the ideas, oh the ideas, are alive and humming, though spoken gently, carefully. This is not the world of mobs. This is the world of conversation, of candlelit debates and whispered manifestos passed from hand to hand, of salons and secret societies. You are now seated in the back of a salon in 1791. Let the murmur of voices guide you. The Parisian salon. Velvet and Voltaire salons were not official institutions. They were living rooms, drawing rooms, parlors, spaces curated mostly by women, salonières, who invited writers, thinkers, dissidents, scientists, and occasionally aristocrats to speak freely, or at least, as freely as one dared. In one salon, a philosopher argues that reason should guide all laws. In another, a pamphlet critical of the monarchy is passed beneath the table. Chandeliers glitter above you, but they don't outshine the minds gathered beneath them. These gatherings weren't always loud. The revolution at its core was born in soft voices. Ideas like liberty, fraternity, equality took root in rooms just like this. And many of those voices belonged to women. Madame Roland, Madame de Staël, hostesses and thinkers. They were the moderators of reason and rebellion, clubs of change, the Jacobins and beyond. Outside the salons, a new kind of political gathering emerged. The clubs, the Jacobin Club, the Cordelier, the Feuillon. Each had its meeting hall. Each had a purpose, a vision. The Jacobins, for example, began as a group of moderate reformers. But as the revolution deepened, they radicalized. Their speeches became louder, their targets more specific. Inside, you might hear a trembling student speak of class injustice, a former priest calling for the end of the church's political power, a merchant demanding fixed bread prices and the abolition of noble privilege, or too extreme. The walls echoed with passion, but also with suspicion. You see, the clubs also watched one another. Each suspected the others of being too soft. In the end, it wasn't just the aristocracy that faced scrutiny. It was everyone. The spy in the parlor. Or worse, salons were not immune to danger. The same candlelit setting that allowed for deep thought could also hide danger. An informant might be seated right beside you. One misplaced metaphor, and the host could be imprisoned. One overheard word, people gathered. Still, because for many this was the only space where truth, or some version of it, could survive. These rooms became sanctuaries of thought, but also pressure cookers of anxiety. Ideas and agitation art. Many of the era's most radical shifts began as ideas, not as actions. Should the king be held accountable, or only landowners? Should all men vote? Should religion be separated from government? Painters captured debates on canvases. Poets encoded revolutionary spirit into verse. Printers risked their lives to distribute illegal pamphlets. And yet, even in this landscape of radical change, there was gentleness. Someone would offer pastries. The chairs would be arranged just so. A violin might be played in the corner as debate simmered down into soft agreement or thoughtful silence. The salons were bridges, between worlds that would soon collide. The fading light, many salons closed. As the terror began, the fear that crept into the streets found its way into the parlor. Those who had once spoken boldly began to hold their tongues, or fled Paris altogether. Perhaps, if people simply talked, change could come without blood. Some went silent forever, but their words remained. Ideas planted like seeds, waiting for a time less dangerous. When you walk through the rooms of the revolution, remember the salons, remember the velvet chairs and the careful questions, the whispered disagreements, the belief that it didn't. But for a while, in the half-light of a Parisian parlor, it almost felt like it could. And now, we take one final turn, away from conversation and toward the very apex of privilege and oblivion. We leave behind the candlelit salons of Paris and drift through the forests west of the city, toward something far more glittering, far more isolated, far more unaware. You are now walking through the gilded gates of Versailles. This is not the France of bakers and barricades. This is the France of powdered wigs, polished marble, and fountains that never run dry. But look closely, his stockings. One hands him his shirt. Only the highest-ranked man present is allowed to pass the king his breeches. Every gesture is tradition. Every silence is protocol. You do not speak to the king. You await his glance. He is dressed in front of you not as a man, but as a symbol. And when he walks through the hall of mirrors, hundreds bow. This is power wrapped in ritual, game, candied oranges, midday, feasts, and formality. The king may eat alone, often perfumed or gilded, but the act of watching him eat is public. Meanwhile, the court dines on delicacies, truffles, dozens of courses, even before noon. Wine flows freely, a compliment, a word whispered at the right time. Yet there is a strange hunger in the air, not for food, but for favor. Every noble here is jostling silently. A look. Everything at Versailles is politics, cloaked in lace. You may spend weeks waiting for a moment with the queen, is to be forgotten. A second with the Dauphin. Even a shared glance with the king's cousin can shape your future. It is exhausting, and yet no one dares leave. To be at Versailles is to be seen. To leave Versailles. Scents and shadows. Despite its beauty, Versailles is not always pleasant. There are no proper bathrooms. Perfume covers the smells of sweat, sickness, and spoiled food. The walls are beautiful, but thin. Gossip echoes through them like wind. And while courtiers lounge in silk, the world outside is fraying. They hear rumors of shortages, of unrest, of angry women marching, foreign, fickle. But here, it feels distant, unreal. Surely the king will fix it. Surely the people love the monarchy. So they dress, they dance, they write poetry and flirt in the gardens. But something has shifted. You can feel it. In the way the servants move, in the nervous glances exchanged when the word Paris is spoken, in the queen's new habit of locking her doors at night. Marie Antoinette. Myth and misunderstanding. She was never meant to rule. Born in Austria, married young, and thrust into the spotlight, Marie Antoinette became both idol and scapegoat. To her friends, she was charming, playful, devoted to her children. To the public, she was Madame Deficit, frivolous. They said she spent while they starved. They accused her of saying, "Let them eat cake," though she never did. She escaped the rigidity of court in her faux village, the hameau, where she dressed as a shepherdess among manicured sheep. Was it escapism, arrogance, or simply loneliness? Whatever the truth, her isolation became symbolic. The palace, a gilded cage, and Versailles, once the center of royal power, was slowly becoming irrelevant. Evening at the end. As dusk falls, the fountains quiet, the corridors dim. Courtiers retreat to their salons and secret rooms. Outside the gates, the revolution marches closer. But inside, they dance. Tonight there is music, and laughter, and the clink of crystal. It will be one of the last nights like this. Soon, the palace will be stormed, the king and queen taken, the monarchy dismantled. Versailles will fall silent, a symbol not of glory, but of how far power can drift from reality before the world demands its return. And so, we close the chapter on another world. One of revolution and ritual, terror and tenderness, candles and collapse. You've walked through the shadows of a slum, the fire of the guillotine, the quiet of a salon, and the glow of a mirrored hall. Now the streets of Paris are silent again. The lights in Versailles have gone out, and you can rest. Sleep well, traveler of time. More histories await you when you wake.